Hello and welcome to Forward Boldly. I'm your host, Christine Niles. October 13th marks the 11-year anniversary of the death of Father Joseph Moreno, a Buffalo, New York priest who was found shot dead in his rectory with a single bullet wound to the head, right here behind his left ear. His death was immediately ruled a suicide, but so many anomalies surrounding the circumstances of his death, as well as things happening in the days and weeks leading up to his death, call into serious question that conclusion of suicide. A couple of years ago, I aired a major spotlight highlighting the investigation into his death. We interviewed experts in their field, and we recreated the crime scene. I want to play a short clip from that spotlight. Susan Moreno has been trying for years to uncover the truth about her twin brother's death at St. Lawrence Catholic Church on that fateful Saturday afternoon. His death was immediately ruled a suicide. In June 2020, Susan commissioned renowned forensic scientist Michael Archer to recreate the crime scene for Church Militant cameras in a Buffalo hotel conference room. Archer has 22 years of experience, being present at more than 1,000 autopsies, and he's reconstructed hundreds of homicides and suicides. Church Militant also asked experienced detective Brian Berg to look into the case. Berg has served nearly 40 years as a police officer and detective and has analyzed dozens of death scenes. And we turn to Dr. Cyril Wecht, a nationally respected forensic pathologist and former president of the American Academy of Forensic Sciences, with decades of experience, who conducted his own autopsy of Moreno in 2015. Their conclusion: nothing about this case was handled correctly. A crucial aspect of this story involves the fact that Father Moreno was a whistleblower. He was a whistleblower on the corrupt lavender mafia in the Buffalo diocese. He knew about all sorts of abuse allegations, crimes, offenses committed against victims, including against children. For instance, he knew about an allegation made by a parent against Auxiliary Bishop Gross. Gross has been in that diocese for decades, far longer than Bishop Richard Malone. For those of you who may have been following the news stories about the Diocese of Buffalo over the past several years, you would know that Buffalo has been absolutely scandal-racked, and that there was a Vatican investigation, and at the end of it, Bishop Malone was forced to resign in disgrace because of his mishandling of sex abuse. But even though Bishop Malone is the one who got all the media attention, it was really his auxiliary bishop, Bishop Gross, who knew where all the bodies were buried. I did a special report on this titled "The Real Predator Protector." Bishop Gross has been in the Diocese of Buffalo for decades, longer than Bishop Malone. And he was actually the first point of contact for victims to speak to when they were reporting any sex abuse by clergy. And so he was the one who was interviewing the victims, interviewing the perpetrators, and had all the records. In any case, a parent allegedly accused Bishop Gross of being found in a hot tub with a 12-year-old boy. There was also the case of Father Dennis Reiter, a horrible case. And before I proceed, I should warn viewers that there will be some graphic elements included in this episode. We are, of course, dealing with a death, and we will be including some graphic crime scene photos as well as from the autopsy of Father Moreno, and then, of course, some disturbing details from some of the sex abuse that he uncovered. But Father Dennis Reiter, this is another case that we have covered extensively at Church Militant. We interviewed one of the victims, the young victims of Father Reiter, Anthony Ravarini. And Anthony was essentially forced at the age of 6 years old to perform oral sex on this priest, and forced into it, had no idea what was happening at the time, lured into the rectory with the promise of ice cream, and then trapped in this priest's office. So these were some of the things that Father Moreno was going to expose. He was compiling a dossier on these crimes, and he was going to take it to the papal nuncio and expose all of this. But he was silenced before he could do so. Let's go ahead and play a clip from the spotlight. Father Moreno was a popular priest loved by many, known for helping the poor, raising money for dozens of local charities and running food pantries. He had a big vision, planning on converting a closed-up Dairy Queen across the street from the parish into a little breakfast joint and employing some down-on-their-luck parishioners. He was chaplain to the Buffalo Police and State Police, and his heroic work on 9/11 garnered him a Medal of Honor from the governor. His funeral was attended by more than 2,000 people, including law enforcement as well as clergy and laity who filled the parish to capacity. What the public didn't know at the time was that Moreno was about to blow the lid off the corrupt homosexual network in the diocese, planning to meet with then Papal Nuncio Archbishop Carlo Maria Vigano on Monday, armed with a dossier full of information and evidence against fellow clergy, a fact attested to in a notarized 2018 affidavit by Lonnie V., a friend of Father Moreno, who testified that the priest told him by phone they needed to meet to discuss something important. Moreno told him, "I have to tell you in person. It's very ugly, and I don't trust this phone. If things go sour, I'm going to Washington, D.C. on Monday and blow this whole thing sky high." He never made it to Washington. St. Jerome says ignorance of Scripture is ignorance of Christ. But looking at the plethora of online materials on Scripture sometimes lends to greater confusion than clarity. But the good news is that Church Militant is offering an Ephesians masterclass. It's being led by Chris Plants. He has a master's degree in theology from the Franciscan University of Steubenville. He's taught numerous courses in theology, and he's going to give you an 8-week deep dive into the book of Ephesians. You don't have to spend months and months and months reading Scripture, spending thousands of dollars. It'll be an 8-week crash course, compelling, engaging, easy to grasp. Go to churchmilitant.com/Ephesians-masterclass. That's churchmilitant.com/Ephesians-masterclass to learn more. And something else as well, very key to all of this. $500,000 were missing from the parish funds. Father Moreno conducted an audit in the weeks leading up to his death. This is what he discovered. He actually told that to his sister 2 days before he was found dead. $500,000 missing from parish funds. And he told his sister Susan that he suspected Deacon Paul Weisenberger. Deacon Paul was at St. Lawrence Parish at the time. He was the administrator. He had access to the parish funds, and he also had excessive medical bills that he and his family were required to pay. And Father Moreno told his sister, "I don't trust him. I don't trust him." Turns out Deacon Paul was the one who discovered Father Moreno's body. Let's take a listen. The deacon was the one who first discovered Moreno's body during a visit to the rectory with his wife. He told police he went upstairs, saw Moreno sitting in his chair and believing him to be asleep, tried to wake him, only to find he'd been shot in the head. When the deacon eventually called police, he phoned it in as a suicide, no questions asked. Likewise, it was Weisenberger who first made public comments that Moreno killed himself, telling media, quote, "He took his own life. The investigation is still going on, but from what I know, it's quite clear." But was it a suicide? And how would Deacon Paul know that? As he went upstairs, he told Matthew Lukes, known as Matty, a good friend of Father Moreno, to stay downstairs. It was Lukes' idea to go to the rectory to check up on Father Moreno. Lukes was worried after he'd failed to show up to a scheduled mass at a nearby nursing home earlier in the afternoon. But after Deacon Paul went upstairs, he told Lukes to stay downstairs because Father was dead. So Matthew Lukes was a firsthand eyewitness because he was there on the scene when Father Moreno's body was found. But of course, as the clip shows, he wasn't allowed to come upstairs. He was told to stay downstairs. I spoke directly to Matthew Lukes. He confirmed all of this to me. He also confirmed that he heard a tremendous amount of noise upstairs because he didn't know what was going on, but Deacon Paul was clearly moving many things around and making all sorts of noise. So clearly it seems the crime scene was compromised by Deacon Paul. Another very important point, Deacon Paul did not call the police immediately. He actually called someone at the church, and then he called the police. And he told the police it was a suicide. That's just what he told them. And so the police just sort of assumed that's what it was. And that was the official ruling based on what Deacon Paul initially told everybody. And interestingly as well, Monsignor Lapuma from the church shows up. He's from the diocese. And Matthew Luke saw him going through Father Moreno's computers, doing something with his computer, looking through the files, perhaps taking files. We asked Monsignor Lapuma directly, did you take any files from Father Moreno? What were you doing on his computer at the crime scene? He would not answer those questions. He did respond, and he answered other questions. He would not answer those specific questions. To this day, we don't know what he was doing on the computer and whether or not he took some files, deleted them, what he did. Very, very suspicious. Another aspect that has to be considered about this was the botched crime scene. There were so many anomalies to this crime scene. I just want to play a short clip of one of the bizarre circumstances surrounding that crime scene.
My 11-year-old could have done a better job processing this scene. The Buffalo Police Department made a real mockery of this.
The crime scene itself is problematic. Various photos showing all sorts of differences from one moment to the next.
If you're the crime scene technician, you're going to get these stuck in your face in a courtroom saying, well, isn't it a fact that the pill bottle is in a different spot? How do you explain that? You can't explain why the gun is moved. The letters are moved. The letter box of stationery is moved. Everything's, it's just, I've never seen anything like this.
For instance, in this photo, the pill bottle cap is facing the desk, and a notebook can be seen next to the phone. In the next photo, the pill bottle's position is reversed, the cap facing away from the desk, and the notebook gone. The envelopes are also rearranged. Questions remain about the gun. The gun doesn't appear in Moreno's lap, removed by Officer Chris Pliska, who, according to an October 13, 2012 memo from Detective James Lima, put the gun and the bullets in a plastic evidence bag. He states that he did this for safety reasons when ambulance personnel arrived.
The EMS should have gone in, pronounced him, left the room, and they should have locked that room down. They should have documented that room. They should have photographed the room. They should have processed the room.
We don't let the firemen in. We don't let all kinds of people in there and contaminate the scene. It's a crime scene. And we never move the victim's body before photos are taken. We never secure the gun before photos are taken. So it leaves me to wonder, was this officer told to say that he moved the gun? Or did he move the gun? Was he a new officer? Did he? I'm not trying to cast blame or anything. It wasn't handled correctly.
It all starts with Officer Plesko. Why did he move the gun?
And it gets even stranger. The gun used to kill Father Moreno. That gun itself has a very strange history. And to this day, it remains a mystery how that particular gun ended up at the crime scene. Back in 1997, a woman named Carol Curtin, who was a parishioner of Father Moreno, found that gun in her home. It had belonged to her grandfather. She didn't want a gun in the home, so she called up Father Moreno and asked him, because he was chaplain to the Buffalo Police Department, had a very good relationship with the Buffalo Police Department. She asked him to arrange for a detective to come take the gun and destroy it. And so that's what Father Moreno did. Detective Yates comes over, takes the gun, and says he's going to destroy it. That's in 1997. That very gun winds up in the rectory of Father Moreno's office upstairs. That's the gun used to kill him in 2012. How is that possible? Let's go ahead and play another clip from the spotlight on this. From the affidavit, I, Carol A. Curtin, immediately transferred over the gun to Detective Yates.
That gun was turned into the Buffalo Police Department in 1997 to be destroyed, and all of a sudden it ends up at a crime scene in 2012. and there's no explanation given. There was an internal investigation conducted that Buffalo police refused to tell the victim's sister, twin sister Sue. So that raises suspicion.
So after our spotlight aired in 2021, we requested the complete investigative file from the Buffalo Police Department because what we had was incomplete. We know for a fact that the Buffalo Police launched an internal investigation into the provenance of that gun. How did it end up at the crime scene? There was an internal investigation. However, those files were missing from the investigative file of Father Moreno's death. So because they wouldn't hand it over, we actually had to file a lawsuit, a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit, demanding that they hand that over because those are public records. Those are public records. They don't get to keep them. And after we filed the FOIA lawsuit, they handed over this investigative file, which was incomplete. It was missing anything about that internal investigation. What else was it missing? The ballistics test on the gun, something that is required in every homicide investigation involving guns. Ballistics test. That was missing from the investigative file. And no matter how much we questioned, how often we questioned, they simply would not give answers. Again, very, very strange. And even more, it doesn't stop there. I mean, taking all of that together already calls into question this official ruling of suicide. But then you have the matter of Father Moreno's crippled left hand. And the way that it got crippled was because there was a break-in, a robbery in his rectory. He had to stop. He had to fight with the burglar, and the burglar stabbed him in the left hand and caused some serious nerve damage. And from that moment on, he was unable to use that left hand normally. While he could carry very light objects, he was unable to carry normal objects, and certainly not heavy objects. And we actually showed affidavits from individuals who knew Father, who testified, swore under oath that, for instance, when he was offering Mass, he almost never used his left hand for Mass because it was useless. It was crippled. Other people as well said he almost never used his left hand for anything. And yet, the death scenario, okay, this is suicide scenario that was being proposed by the medical examiner at the time, Dr. Diane Verdes, was this one, that he actually picked up the gun with his crippled left hand, even though he's right-handed. Keep in mind, he's right-handed. And yet somehow, for whatever reason, he picks up the gun with his left hand, positions it right here, then he takes his right hand, goes over his head, and then pushes the trigger with his right hand, killing himself. I mean, I don't think I even need to say anything to highlight how completely inane that is. The common sense way, if you're going to commit suicide, the most common way, obviously, is you take your dominant hand and you shoot yourself here or here or here. That's how it's typically done. You don't do this. Who does that? In any case, Dr. Verdes actually showed some openness to Susan when she came to her, talking about the crippled left hand. She showed some openness of possibly changing the conclusion of suicide if she could get proof, incontrovertible proof, that the hand was indeed nerve damaged. Unfortunately, Dr. Verdes abruptly resigned, and so Susan went ahead and she commissioned a world-renowned forensic pathologist to conduct a second autopsy, a more thorough autopsy on Father Moreno. Let's take a look at this clip. I hope you're enjoying the show. The rest of the show is behind the paywall, so please go to churchmilitant.com to watch the rest. For those who are not premium subscribers, you can sign up at churchmilitant.com/go premium. See you there.